This is my van. Sometimes we call it the Safari or the Adventure Van. I like to call it the GMC 1701, but mostly we just call it the van. This 99 GMC Safari was my parents' family van, then it became my backpacking van, my wedding and honeymoon van, and now it's my family van. I've fixed a lot of things over the years, including water pump, power steering pump, fuel pump, alternator, distributor cap, intake manifold and valve cover seals, ball joints, U-joints, shocks, all sorts of oil seals, and I've even swapped the whole rear end with one from the salvage yard. So maybe you're thinking, this van should have been retired a long time ago. But the thing is, I just haven't found anything that has quite the same utility as this van. Normally, I put my 3 boys in the back row without any middle seats. In the first year of the pandemic, when all the restaurants were closed, we would put a table in here, order takeout, and then play board games and puzzles just to get out of the house. I've hauled lumber, drywall boards, and junk for all kinds of construction and renovation projects. I can throw my road bike or mountain bike or fat bike inside and not have to worry about it getting stolen. It has a huge amount of cargo room for going camping, but at the same time, fits in my garage with lots of room to walk around. Besides, replacement parts are so readily available from Rock Auto or a salvage yard, and there's such a huge amount of information online that fixing things has become almost an addiction. More recently, I got rid of the all-wheel drive transfer case and replaced it with a 4x4 T-case from a 95 Chevy S10 pickup. That was so I could flat tow it behind my RV. As my boys grow up, we are hoping to explore more of the backcountry, off the beaten path. But when I look underneath the van, I see a juicy oil pan and a front differential just waiting to get cracked by a big rock on a rutted dirt road. As it sits now, the 7.5-inch clearance isn't great, and I've thought about getting bigger tires, but realistically, the biggest tire I can get on is 30 inches and will require a lift kit and bumper mods, and that only gives me 1 more inch of clearance. So rather than messing around with my suspension and making the already lousy gas mileage worse, I think I just want to add a skid plate under the front to hopefully reduce the chances of a catastrophe on a back road. Less worrying means more freedom to explore. So where to start? A few years ago, a guy called Lifted AW Astro posted a schematic. Basically, it's a big steel plate bolted to the first and second cross members. I bought this 3/16-inch steel plate and 1/4-inch angle bar from my local metal shop for less than $200. It's 20 by 66 inches. The first step was to make the metal bracket to bolt to the back of the front cross member. You can also see here the bolts holding the base plate for flat towing. Because I don't have access to the inside of the cross member, I used rivet nuts rather than tapping threads into the holes. I used M10 hardware for all the bolts except the center bolt where I used an M12 because there was already a hole there. After cutting the angle bar to 12 inches, I used increasing drill bit sizes to get to the 10mm holes that I needed because I didn't have a stepped bit that was thick enough. I drilled corresponding holes into the main plate to match the bracket. Next, I needed to bend the main plate so that it would connect to the front bracket at the right angle and fit around the oil pan and exhaust pipe. To bend the 3/16-inch steel plate, I first used an angle grinder to cut about halfway through the steel plate. Then, using a bunch of steel bars and clamps, I carefully bent the first 2 inches by about 5 degrees. I repeated the process to bend the next 22 inches of the plate upwards by 3 inches. I took my time with the angle grinder and measured the depths of my cuts with a caliper. The bends turned out pretty good. I wanted to add 2 brackets in the middle to give the plate more support, so I cut and welded some 1/4-inch angle bars together. These conveniently connected into the 2 M12 bolts holding the front differential. It was 3.5 inches from the bolt centers to the plate. Next, I fitted the plate to the car to test the fit and to drill pilot holes into the rear cross member to make sure that the holes lined up properly. Then I took it back out and enlarged the pilot holes. Safety goggles. I was pretty happy with the fit, so I welded back the cuts that I made for the bends. I planned all the cuts to be on the top side of the plate so that the weld lines would not be visible from below. I had my little MIG welder dialed in to max power for 3/16-inch steel, but it didn't seem to penetrate all the way through. Oh well. Next, I bent the two last inches upwards by about 45 degrees and trimmed corners so that it doesn't snag on anything in case I have to back up. I don't want to have to take the skid plate off every time I need an oil change, so I cut a 4-inch by 6-inch hole right under the oil drain plug. I welded flats on each side and then tapped some screw holes so that the oil drain is easy to access. I didn't make a hole for the oil filter because I think I could just reach around. We'll see how big a mess I make next time I change the oil. I put some rivet nuts into the rear crossmember and mounted the plate so I could go on a test drive. What I found was that at some RPMs I would feel more vibration than usual. I think this was because the large steel plate was resonating at specific frequencies, so I welded a bar to the plate at an angle to hopefully reduce the resonance. Finally, I added countersinks to protect the bolt heads and painted the plate with some Rust-Oleum. I fully expect the paint to get destroyed and for rust to develop, but that's okay. I'll just give it a little Rust-Oleum every now and then. I'll mention now that I use stainless steel hardware with regular steel here, which should be avoided because of galvanic corrosion in wet environments. But I always park in the garage and I put a good amount of paint on all the exposed steel surfaces, so hopefully it doesn't become a major issue. So there it is, skid plate for the van. I've learned a lot from this van, things I hope to pass on to my kids, like the joy of fixing broken things, or what to do with the feelings I get when every other van in the school parking lot has 2 sliding doors and mine only has 1. Or how to be thankful and make the most of today, because tomorrow the van may not be running anymore. I once said to my van, "My old friend, you have served me well and are now full of years. Why not live out your remaining days watching sunsets and grazing in green pastures?" To which it replied, "Nonsense! Let us adventure until we can adventure no more." Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like or subscribe. Or if you have thoughts or suggestions, please share it in the comments below.